Yo, ladies and gentlemen, you know what? You know who I'm looking forward to hearing at the inquest? Brad Hargreaves. I'm looking forward to hearing what Brad's got to say because the situation surrounding Brad is extremely strange. We have to be honest. The fact that Mark Williams Thomas never delivered any statement from Brad never made any sense. Remember, he claimed he spoke to all of the witnesses, barring one. That one was Rocky. Off the back of that podcast, it sounds like he hasn't spoken to two of the witnesses, key witnesses, and that's Brad, because there's no audio, there's no statement, there's no nothing from Brad in that podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive in. We're going to look at a few things, give ourselves a bit of perspective. I do apologize. I am bunged up with hay fever at this moment in time. My nose is absolutely blocked. The tablets ain't working. The nasal spray's not working. I don't know what's going on. So please do bear with me as we get through this video. I think at this moment in time, I want to focus on Brad and Brandon's statements because it seems to me that Brad is more or less regurgitating things that Brandon said to Mark Williams Thomas. Now, that wouldn't make any sense to me because they weren't together allegedly. Or were they together? I mean, at this moment in time, we haven't been given any clarity on where Brandon was whilst Jay was at the Airbnb. We've been given no clarity on where Brad actually was when Jay was at that Airbnb. We've been told by Josh between the hours of 5 to 7, him and Brad were back at Jay's hotel. Although he never referred to it as Jay's hotel, he referred to it as Brad's. It was Jay's hotel, and we got told via Josh that Brad was there. However, what we got told by Brad is that he just come out of a festival when he spoke to Jay on the phone. So again, we haven't been given any clarity on where Brad was at the time of speaking to Jay whilst on the phone and what his explanation would have been for splitting up from Jay at the NRG festival. We would also like to hear an explanation for these 5 missing hours. According to Ayub, Brad went missing for 5 hours. He jumped out the car just before the tunnel, claiming that he wanted to go to the toilet, and then he did not want to get back in the car. Now, it's been said that Brad purposely told Ayub that he needed to go to the toilet because he wanted to get out the car. The moment he got out the car, he knew he was never getting back in that car. If that is true, you have to ask yourself at that point, why? If you guys are just going to the mountains to look for Jay, why would Brad be scared to get back into the car? And then from there, Brad goes missing. And we're not told about it until Ayub mentions it in a live stream. It seems like Ayub's been the one leaking certain bits of information over the months of this case. So he was the one that told us about the 2 men that were with Ophelia, one of them pushing a wheelbarrow. He eventually told us, after denying it multiple times, that a fight did break out outside the NRG festival and a watch was stolen, which was a Green Hulk. Now, again, in my opinion, I think that was a diversion tactic. It was back to the original strategy, making people believe a watch had been stolen. So that's exactly what the footage in the picture of Jay was describing, a watch being stolen, which was later denied by Ayub. He said he didn't know anything about it on multiple occasions. Then 10, 11 months later, you want to tell us it was true. It did happen. Is that what you're trying to tell us? Or by you saying that it did happen, is you telling us that you actually made that shit up? Because I know the watch story was fake. It was a planted story. It never happened. So for Ayub to then go on the live stream and say, actually, it did happen, is him confirming that he fabricated that story. Because I can tell you now that that story never happened. It's the reason why Mark Williams Thomas wasn't able to verify it. It was the reason why the media wasn't able to verify it. It was the reason why the police wasn't able to verify it. That watch situation wasn't able to get verified by no one. Why? Because it never happened. Tell me this, if a situation can't get verified, if there's no evidence to prove that that situation happened, what does it go down as? A conspiracy. So that watch conspiracy, that's what it is. That wasn't made up by us. The conspiracies were made up by the people involved in the case. But now the conspiracies are being blamed on people like us that are trying to understand what truly happened to Jay. We're trying to make sense of all of the different conspiracies that were planted by people that were involved in the case, like the stealing of this watch. It was planted information to make it look like Jay had done something wrong and he was heading to the mountains for that reason. His friends were going to later come out and say they know nothing about it, but they're going to back it by saying if Jay would have said it, he wouldn't have made it up, knowing that that footage was posted in a WhatsApp family group, making it look like it come from Jay. So by them saying if Jay said that, he wouldn't have made it up, is them backing that conspiracy. They're now making it look like Jay has stolen this watch, he feared for his life, and he went to the Airbnb. That's the picture being painted. You have to then take in the audio from Lucy, because Lucy's the one that really drives that conspiracy. She really pushes the conspiracy behind the scenes to Mark Williams Thomas to make it look like Jay stole a watch, feared for his life, got 2 knives. She added that Jay told her earlier that night he was on a mission. That again supports the theory of Jay stealing this watch and going to sell it for 10 quid. Why is Lucy so supportive of that conspiracy? Why? Why is she so supportive of that conspiracy? Why is she making it look like that's something Jay was involved in? So I was recently sent that podcast with the 2 lovely ladies, and the blonde lady that was there, it seemed like she was not trying to deviate from the accident narrative. For someone that said that she had been following the case from the very, very beginning, I was finding it extremely frustrating how she was ignoring all of the red flags. Back to the statements between Brad and Brandon. Again, it sounds like Brad was regurgitating information that he was given by Brandon, and then he tried to make it his own. And the reason I say that is because the part I'm about to highlight, if happens, couldn't have happened twice. And what I mean by that is we were told by Brandon and Brad that they both told him to turn on his location. See, Brandon told us that he had to help Jay turn on his location because Jay didn't know how to do it. In the same conversation, Brandon tells us that at some point, Brad and Jay would have had a conversation over the phone in between the calls that Brandon and Jay would have been having. And Brandon's last words with Jay would have been, "I've just gone off road, bro." So Brandon speaks to Jay when Jay goes off road. However, what Brad tells us, he says, we told Jay to turn his location on. He was then asked, was you concerned at that point? Brad gives us all 3 answers with his body language. He actually says, yes, I don't know, and then no. No is the actual answer he says, but if you actually go back to the body language, yes is the first answer he gives. Literally, when Isla says to Brad, was you concerned at that point? He says with his body language, and then his answer is no, because it clicks in that he needs to make it look like everything was okay with Jay when they spoke on the phone. See, the main point of Brad and Brandon's story is to say that Jay left the Airbnb and everything was okay when he left that Airbnb. But also the part that Brad had to play was tell us where Jay's body actually was. After Brad said, turn your location on, he said that he wasn't concerned, but then got concerned when they realized how far away Jay was. So Brad then claims he looked at the times. It was about 45 minutes in the car or 11-hour walk. He wasn't too sure if the times were right because he was just trying to remember it. Then he told Jay to get a taxi. See, at that point, if Brad would have had that conversation with Jay, it means that Jay would have needed to turn his location on when he had the conversation with Brad. That doesn't make any sense. It couldn't have happened unless Brad and Brandon were together when they had this conversation with Jay. But they don't say that they were together. They're acting as if they were separate. Brad was with Josh. Brad hasn't confirmed that from his own mouth. And Brandon was wherever he was. We don't know where Brandon was. But if Brad asked Jay to turn his location on and he turned his location on, and then with that location, Brad was able to then see how far away Jay was. He could see how long it was by car. He could see how long it was via walking. He could see how long it was via cycling. All of that information would have been in front of Brad in order for him to then say they become concerned once they knew how far away he were, then gave you that information to then tell Jay, you might as well get a taxi. It means Brad had that information. Now, if Brad and Jay was on the phone long enough to garner all of that information, at what point did Brandon speak to Jay and Jay tell Brandon that he's gone off road? There seems like there's a lot of time here. There's a lot of time that's not being used, a lot of time that's being wasted. When you go back to Brad's interview, the only real part that he adds that we hadn't heard via Lucy or Brandon is the part of where Jay's body was. So when Brad says he's not going all the way up that road, you have to look at the eyes. When he does that to his head, his eyes look in a certain direction, and then he opens his eyes up even wider, to the widest they can actually open. Then he turns his head back round. At that point is when he's pointing in the direction of where Jay's body is. The sentence he then uses is, he goes down this little bit. Not a big drop, just a little drop. Do you understand? Again, explaining where Jay's body is. He follows on by saying, if he was anything like me, he wouldn't have gone all the way down there. So he more or less points you in the direction of where Jay's body is and tells you exactly at what kind of point of the mountain Jay's body would be. If we literally go back and listen to Brad's interview with Isla again, and he talks about the little drop, and it's not a big drop, it's a little drop. Think about what he's saying. He's telling you where to look. If you think about their stories, ladies and gentlemen, there's no explanations as to where they was at that time and why Jay went to the Airbnb, why they split up from Jay. These are the answers that Debbie and Warren want to know. See, many people are under the assumption that Debbie and Warren would have spoken to Brad and Lucy already. I don't think they've had an in-depth conversation with either of these guys. I think to a degree they have been fobbed off with statements. Otherwise, Debbie would have never have said in her Sun exclusive interview, why didn't Lucy just go to the ping location? If she knew where he was, why didn't you just go to his location? I mean, why is she asking that on the Sun exclusive? If she's got direct contact with Lucy, if she can speak to Lucy at any time, if she had access to Lucy in that way, I'm sure that would have been a question she would have been asking Lucy, right? The inquest got adjourned for a reason, because Debbie wanted answers. She wanted all of the witnesses, not just Abe and Rocky. She wants all of the witnesses to get into the courtroom and tell their sides of the story. In my opinion, the witnesses believe that Josh Forshaw would have been enough to close the case. But Josh Forshaw went into that inquest with no facts whatsoever. Everything that came out of Josh Forshaw's mouth was unable to be verified. No one could verify it. Therefore, it goes down as a what? A conspiracy. But oh, apparently we're the ones. The content creators online, the people that are trying to understand what truly happened to Jay Slater, they're the ones that are the conspiracy theorists. They're the ones that are making stuff up. They're the ones that are putting out misinformation, not sourcing the information correctly to confirm if it's fact. Hold on. Everything we have been unraveling over these past weeks and months have been based on what? Facts. Facts from the case. Whether they're facts based on what people have said, they're based on facts. The picture of Jay in the back of the car claiming he is going to sell this AP, not the Rolex one, the AP. That picture has been debunked. We can see Abe taking a picture of Jay in the back of the car. We also have Abe confirming to Mark Williams Thomas only weeks after Jay went missing that he's got pictures of Jay in the back of the car smiling his face off. Where are those pictures? What pictures is he referring to? Oh, the fabricated one that they put out there, which I've debunked and deciphered and proven that it was Abe that took the picture of Jay in the back of the car? Or is he referring to the multiple of pictures they tried to take just to get the right one? Boom, yeah, we got the right one. Let's quickly edit it, give it a bit of a blur, and then we'll give it to Josh Forshaw so then sends to Debbie. That's what we'll do. Because that's exactly what they've done. See, everyone's been getting plays. They've been controlling our perception, and people don't even know it. Like the lady on that podcast with the blonde hair, the lady that says she's been following this case since the very, very beginning. If she had been following this case since the very, very beginning, then she would have known about all of the red flags as well as all of the things that have been discovered since Jay went missing. So for her to sit on that podcast and not even really put anything on the table that's worth listening to, other than a narrative that's been created by the Spanish, that's literally been spun by all of the reporters that haven't even investigated anything. We have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, there hasn't been a police investigation into the death of Jay Slater. Let me repeat, there hasn't been a police investigation into the death of Jay Slater. So how does anyone know if anything nefarious would have happened? See, another thing we were told, which is a fact, ladies and gentlemen, is Jay was incapacitated. Jay was intoxicated. The word incapacitated is extremely strong because that means Jay was in such a compromising position, anyone could have done anything to him. But bearing in mind Jay was incapacitated, how did Jay get into a car with two strangers and write a message about stealing a watch? But not only write a message about stealing a watch, he also knew how much the watch was worth. In the first message that was put in the video of Abe driving, it said, I've just stolen a 12K Rollie. How the hell does an incapacitated person know how much a watch is after it's just being stolen 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning? How can he confidently say in that video that he's en route to go and sell it for £10,000? You then have to ask yourself at this point, why would Jay then do that? Is Jay known for doing that? Has Jay done that before? Gone out of his way to make it look like he's doing something wrong, but he ain't done nothing at all. Literally, he's been sitting in his house playing PS5, spaced out of his face on some narcotics, and then he randomly rats in his Snapchat, just stolen a Rolex, off to go and sell it for 10 quid, although he's in his house, high out of his face, playing computer. I mean, is that the type of person Jay is? Because that's the picture that they're trying to paint. So again, how is an incapacitated person, someone who was mixing their drinks, someone who was taking various different narcotics, How are they confidently telling the world that they've stolen this watch, but they're telling you how much the watch is worth? And then they're telling you how much they're going to sell it for. And at that point, his friends don't know anything about it. And the next time they speak to him, it's going to be at around 8 o'clock in the morning when this guy leaves the Airbnb that they've never been to, that they don't know nothing about. He's going to leave this Airbnb and he's going to walk the wrong way. He's going to walk the wrong way. And that's when he's going to call his friends. That's when he's going to tell them he's in trouble. He doesn't know where he is. He needs water. I mean, come on, that doesn't make any sense. That storyline just makes no sense. The friends are making it look like they don't know what Jay was on, even though at 1:30 to 2 o'clock in the morning, they were all together. They're making it look like they don't know what Jay was on. He decided to go off with these guys. He got into trouble and we never saw him again. Like, we spoke to him on the phone. The story they give us about being on the phone to Jay is basically just telling us he was walking the wrong way and he went off road. Based on how I understand this story today, the friends knew where Jay was and they tried to put together a story to tell you where Jay was without telling you where Jay was. After 12 days, Jay not being found, they needed Brad to come forward and give you the head movement, open his eyes directly in the direction of where Jay's body would be, and then tell you about this little bit, and then going down this little bit. It's not a big drop. So you have to really take in what they're telling us. They knew where Jay was. In my opinion, when they come out of NRG Festival, they took Jay to his demise, and they were fabricating it as they were going along, including the video in the back of the car, filming Ayub, claiming that Jay had stolen a Rolex and he was about to go and sell it for 10 quid. That wasn't Jay. That was the friends. So that makes me believe at that point, they knew something serious had already happened to Jay, so they needed to start playing out this act. They needed to play out this role to make it look like Jay was involved in stealing this watch and he's going to the mountains to go and sell it for 10 quid. But unfortunately, guys, you're never going to see Jay again. When they got to the mountains, they fabricated the blanket video. It was either Brad or Brandon that wore that blanket and took that video with Jay's phone. We always believed the blanket belonged to Lucy. It was the blanket from her apartment. Ayub tried to cover it up by saying, nah, that blanket was in the cupboard at the Airbnb and he's the one that gave it to Jay. Although he said that, we never believed him, and rightly so, because Ophelia told Mark Williams Thomas that she does not recognize that blanket. She was extremely adamant that she doesn't know where that blanket came from. That right there tells me that Lucy would have been at the Airbnb with that blanket. She took the blanket to the Airbnb. They decided to wrap it around the person who took the video on Jay's phone, pretending to be Jay, because for one, they wanted to make it look like Jay went to stay at Ayub's. And this is the reason why Ayub keeps saying he stayed at mine. But why would he only stay there for 40 minutes? Why would he wrap himself up in a blanket, do all of that video footage, only being there for 40 minutes, then leaving and going the wrong way? Ain't it a bit convenient that Ophelia's there to see him going the wrong way as well? The reason they wrapped the person up in a blanket is because without the blanket, it would have been obvious the person wasn't Jay. No, Mark Williams Thomas and his people that are going on podcasts acting as if they know the case like the back of their hands, trying to push this accident narrative, they ain't going to question any of those things. Why Jay would have wrapped himself up in this blanket and left after 40 minutes of being there. Why Jay didn't want to go back to the Airbnb. Why did Jay even go to the Airbnb when his apartment was only 5 minutes down the road? And then taking the stories of the people that last spoke to Jay and see how their stories make sense, especially when it comes to Brandon. See, Brad had enough time to put his story together, which is the reason why Brad gave us a bit more than what Brandon gave us. In my opinion, Brandon was prepping Brad. I think Brandon was encouraging Brad to also do the interview. I think there was a bit of encouragement from all different angles when it came to Brad doing that interview. The most important thing was about controlling perception, but also controlling the narrative. You know, Brad also said in his interview that he told Jay to get a taxi. What did Brandon tell Jay to do? See, if we actually go back and listen to what's being said, Brandon's the one that seems to be controlling the narrative of Jay leaving the Airbnb and Jay getting to the mountains. His job was to control that side of the story. Yeah, I spoke to Jay whilst he was at the Airbnb, and Jay told me that he left. So you got to think at that point, if Jay would have told Brandon that he had left walking, what was Brandon's response? What was Brandon telling him? What was Brandon advising him to do next? Because the amount of time that Jay would have taken to get to the viewpoint, 30 minutes, That's enough time to have a proper conversation, understand where you are, figure out how you're going to get back, call a cab, speak to your mum, speak to your dad, speak to your brother. I mean, there's enough time to do quite a lot within that space of time that they've given us. You have to say that Jay had battery throughout that whole time because they spoke to him whilst he was off road. So Jay's battery lasted him quite some time, if you think about it. Walking from the Airbnb to getting off road, that would have taken him about 40 minutes. But again, there was no plan, no safe route home for Jay. They just allowed him to walk off road and walk through a ravine. He didn't walk off road and walk through a ravine. That's just the story they're painting to us because they're going to find Jay at the bottom of a cliff. So they want to make it look like Jay walked the wrong way and walked off road. No real evidence to prove that Jay walked up that road. In fact, the person that I have spoken to, person who had CCTV footage in Masca, who handed that CCTV footage over to the authorities, they was then advised not to speak to anyone about what happened in that footage. When this person posted about the video footage, this was back in June of last year. The moment she saw the CCTV, the first thing she done was get in contact with the police. The police saw it, the police confiscated it. Guess what? It's never been spoken about again. It's never been spoken about. There was a few people on social media at the time that spoke about it, but it was soon forgotten. So I decided to get in contact with the person who put that post out there. And this person clearly is oblivious to what's been going on in this case because their response to me was, you're going to have to speak to the authorities. They said that the authorities have told them not to speak about that CCTV footage to nobody. That made me question why. Why? Like, why wouldn't they want you to speak about it? As I said, this person seemed to be oblivious. They seemed to feel like they done their part. You know, they had evidence that proved something happened to the person in question, Jay Slater, and they passed that evidence on to the authorities. Thereafter, they don't know what happened. They don't know if people have been arrested. They literally don't know. They don't know. Well, now they do know. The CCTV footage that they had, that they gave to the Spanish authorities, has never been mentioned, heard of, or seen since. It has totally vanished. Now, I have to admit, I was extremely persistent in asking what the person saw. Now, although they didn't go into much detail, they did tell me that what they did see was a commotion that took place involving Jay Slater. This commotion took place in Masca, and there's more than one person on the footage. That's all we know at this moment in time, ladies and gentlemen, and that's information that you won't find in the inquest, information that you won't find in this case whatsoever because it was deleted, erased, and never spoken about, just like multiple other things that have taken place over the last 12 months. One last thing I did want to speak about, but I think I'm going to save this for another video, is DTR finding the blood in the mountain. Remember when DTR found the blood in the mountain? You know what? We're going to save that for another video. Ladies and gentlemen, I need every single one of you to hit the like button. Do subscribe to the channel if we're newly watching. And of course, I need to know exactly what you guys are thinking right about now. The video was about perspective. It was just trying to understand a few aspects of the case. So make sure you guys stay tuned because we're going to be back again with more Jay Slater uploads. Don't go anywhere. But as I said, leave all your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section. We've got some other videos that we've just uploaded on the channel as well. So go and check them out. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.